This month I read 8 novels, 1 novella, 2 manga volumes, and a short story. I don't know what happened. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I'm going to be bringing you all of the books that I read in the month of March. Honestly, I was really surprised when I got to my Goodreads and I scrolled down to where I stopped in February, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of books. I did not realize that I had read that many this month. I don't know what happened, to be perfectly honest with you guys. It didn't feel like I read that much, but apparently I did. I don't know. So the first thing that I read in the month of March was Blackthorn by Clayton Snyder. Okay, so this was a book that didn't really jive with me super well, but I wanted it to. Everything is very insectile. Their transportation is insectile. A lot of the buildings are created out of carapace, that kind of thing. We follow a main character named Matthias who gets basically turned into a little bit of a lab rat early on in his life because he has the ability to see and or talk to the dead. It felt very realistic. He felt like a character that was coming off the page. He was very blunt. He was very crude, all of the things. And it was pretty much action-packed from beginning to end, which is kind of what I was expecting. So in that, all of that fit what I was looking for in this read. I felt like the narration was very jarring, which, going from chapter to chapter, which was something that didn't really bother me as much in the beginning as it did toward the second half and the conclusion of the story. And that's the thing that kind of added to that, I think, was the fact that it started getting very repetitive. It felt like the same plot arc was happening over and over and over and over again after a while. And I really struggled with that. I had a good time with parts of it. I thought that parts of it were really cool. I really liked the concepts and the just general atmosphere of the story. But at the end of everything, it was just kind of an okay. It was something that I have read. I liked bits of it, and overall I had a hard time, especially with the second half of the book. Next up, I finished my buddy read of Augustus by John Williams. This is a historical fiction that details the life of Caesar Augustus, his rise to power and maintenance of that power through epistolary format. So it's all told in letters from the people that were around or opposing Caesar during his lifetime. I have a dedicated review for this book, which you can go watch, so I'm not going to belabor my thoughts on this other than it was an immediate 5-star read. I knew it was going to be a 5-star read about a third of the way through the book. It's brilliant. It's one of the best uses of epistolary novel narrative that I have ever seen. It's heartbreaking, it's fascinating, it brings history so much to life, and that is something that I always really appreciate about historical fiction when it is able to do that. It's just a brilliant book. Next up, I finished 2 more volumes of Alice in Borderland. This is a manga from which was created a TV series on Netflix, Alice in Borderland, which again I had seen last year. I've seen both seasons that are available now. So I talked about this a little bit in my February wrap-up when I read the first volume of this manga set. I had more problems with the second and third volumes because there's a difference between this is the art style, or like that's a normal thing in manga art, which I understand is a thing. The sexual objectification of the female characters was so incredibly prolific in these books. And what really bothered me was it was every female character in like every frame through all 3 volumes, and I was just so tired of it after a while because it was very different than how, for the most part, how the male characters were drawn in the book. Especially what really bothered me is toward the latter half, not shockingly in a manga about people basically playing murder games, there were a few frames where dead female bodies were drawn in a suggestive pose, and that was it for me. I was like, you know, I'm incredibly frustrated by this and disgusted by this, and I'm going to say it in a public sphere because I was really like, nope, I don't care who you're marketing this to. I really like the concepts of this story. I think it's really cool, and it just, in my opinion, the TV series was my preferred way to experience that story because the female characters in the TV series are much more than their physicality, and they're not drawn. They are live actors who are given a chance to portray these characters in a way that is much more nuanced and interesting. Highly recommend the show. I still do. I still really highly recommend the show because I think it takes all of the things that I did like about the original manga and just amplified them and took out a lot of the things that I didn't love as much. Next up, I got to have my first reading experience of author Ryan Kyle, who is a very much beloved indie author, and I decided to start with something light. I wanted to try The Fall because I had been told by a lot of people that this is one of their favorite installments of his Bound in the Broken series, which is now up to 3 novels and 2 novellas, I believe. I really enjoyed this. It is a lot of familiar classic tropes that we see in a lot of classic fantasy where you've got, you know, your humans in armor, you've got your elves, you've got your dragons, you've got kind of this struggle between good and evil. But it's written in a way that is incredibly modern, which I really appreciated. And what I liked about this is action-packed from start to finish, and man, I was impressed by how much Ryan was able to pack in this novella. Like, this is, to me, a good example of what you can do in a novella. It was very clearly defined stakes. I actually got emotionally invested very quickly in some of what was going on. So I had a really good time with it, and I'm looking forward to continuing into Of Blood and Fire at some point in the future, which is book 1. The next book that I read was a beta read, and that was, gotta move over so I can put the thing here, Hills of Heather and Bone by my friend K.E. Andrews. Now, this is the second novel that I have read by Katie. Her original was Assassin of Grins and Secrets, which I have done an interview and a review and all of the things for. Hills of Heather and Bone is basically about a young couple who is on the run, and one of them is there's elemental magic involved. I can't say too much about this book because it's still in the last editing stages prior to publication in May-ish, I believe. Katie's writing has such an incredible color to it. She's so good at bringing her poetic sensibilities into her novels. Everything is described so beautifully. It's so vivid. It's so pretty. Everything's so pretty. I don't know how to describe it other than that. And this book is no different. She did a great job with that in Assassin of Grins and Secrets, and I think Hills of Heather and Bone really just kind of even gives us more of that really beautiful writing and colorful world. Romance is very sweet, and I enjoyed it for the most part, and I think that, yeah, I'm really excited to see what you guys think when it comes out to the general public. The next book that I read, and I read this on my Kindle, but I ended up purchasing a physical copy of it because I enjoyed it so much, is The Blood of Crows by Alex Pierce. Now, as you know, I just released a dedicated review for this book, which I will link up in the cards so you can go watch that. This is a story that has heists intermixed with a murder mystery. It's a very intimate fantasy setting in a single city. Our main character is Ren, who is a young man who has kind of unique abilities. And there's a elemental magic system, and different elements can be used by different genders. There's also a romantic subplot in this book that I really enjoyed. I thought it was very fresh and sweet and authentic as opposed to being toxic and cheesy, and I really appreciated that. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I can see it's definitely lighter than a lot of the fantasy I read, but at the same time, I really appreciated it, and it went really deep and dark, surprisingly, despite that, and I really appreciated the balance that Alex Pierce achieved in this, and this is definitely a book I can see becoming a comfort read for me in the future. After that, back to my friend K.E. Andrews, she released Princess of Moonlight, and this is a short story, and it is about a woman who is a creature who is locked away in the palace of a king who is obsessed with her, and it's very short, but it is, again, packs a massive punch. It is dark, it is very emotional, and once again, she's bringing in that incredible ability for beautiful description of environment, of characters, of color, all of those good things. So definitely check this out if you are on the hunt for a short story. It has very faint kind of vampire vibes, but it's not exactly. So yeah, definitely go check this out if you're looking for a short story. The next book that I finished in March was a advanced reader copy of my friend Andrew D. Meredith's book Fourscored, which by the time this video goes up will be out and available to the general public, so go and grab it because Thrice has been getting so much great attention, book 1 of the Needle and Leaf series. Fourscored really continues all the things that I loved about Thrice, and it delves deeper into that beautiful, wholesome relationship between Joven and Leaf, who are the two main characters. Leaf is a little boy with way too much magic, and Joven is the man who has become his father and his protector, and they are precious. So yeah, I really enjoyed Fourscored. It was like going back and reuniting with old friends. There's so much wholesome content in the beginning of this book, and as the stakes get a little bit more serious and things ramp up to be more action flavored toward the end, it still kind of keeps that beating heart that we loved so much in Thrice and the first half. So anyways, really enjoyed this one as well. You can see my review on Goodreads for more thoughts on that. And then, guys, I am finally able to hold this book up in a video and say that I have finished it. I learned with this book that it is helpful to put pillows on your lap to hold the book for you, because there was no way that I would have been able to hold this book the entire time I was reading it. I would have no wrists left. So I finished Shogun. Shogun is the story, it is a historical fiction by James Clavell of a English captain, or ship's pilot, I should say. He's not a captain, technically speaking. He's a ship's pilot from England who is stranded on the shores of feudal Japan and has to survive all of the incredibly intricate culture things and the samurai culture and all of those things in the middle of a rather tense time between some of the samurai lords. This book is written in omniscient third person, which is something that I hadn't read for a while, and I had forgotten how much I enjoyed it. I actually really don't mind omniscient third person when it is written really well. If you're not familiar with omniscient third person, it's just basically that instead of being locked in one person's head throughout the story, we're head hopping in the middle of paragraphs sometimes. This book was really good. I haven't settled on a definitive rating for it yet, but it's going to be very high. I had a great time with this. There's just so much in this book, and reading all of the really intricate political stuff usually is something that I struggle with. In this book, I actually had a really good time with it. So I'm so happy to finally say that I have read Shogun by James Clavell. I will definitely be continuing this series with Taipan, which is book 2. I had a great time with this, and it was made so much more fun by Alex and Joanna and Alan, who we did discussions for the first 2 parts. We'll be doing a discussion on the 3rd one soon, but I'm finally done reading this book, and it feels great. And I'm really proud to say that I have read this, and it was good. I had a really good time with it. Next up, I read A Drowned Kingdom by P.L. Stewart. This is a book about a young man named Othran, who is the second prince when we meet him of the city of Atlantics. Now, P.L. Stewart decided to write a fantasy novel that deals with a lot of really heavy themes and also is inspired by the lost city of Atlantis. I've been percolating on it for a week now, and I'm still working on how to articulate my thoughts on this book. It is so well done from a standpoint of world building. P.L. put so much work into the detail of this book. It is so detailed. The history, the lineages, everything feels like you are stepping into a real world that has been there for thousands of years, which is something that I am very impressed by whenever I read it, because that takes so much mental effort and organization. Now, that being said, the magic system of this world is still fairly vague in book one, and I know that as the series goes along, PL has said that there's a lot of reveals coming up in this series. It's not obviously a spoiler that in our world, Atlantis sinks, and that being the inspiration for this book, you can kind of draw some conclusions there. And so PATRON, our main character, who is a difficult character to follow sometimes, he's a very bold choice as a protagonist, is tasked with the survival of the remainder of his people, basically. If a book reads like a historical narrative, but it's really dense, I have a really hard time getting through it. And I actually was surprised at how well I moved through this book. It didn't feel tedious at any point. And I do think that part of that did come from the fact that I was also reading Shogun and Augustus and that kind of stuff this month. So I think this was a really good time for me to read it, because I was already sort of in that more epic, vast, historical feel. That is Drowned Kingdom by P.L. Stewart, which was the second to last book I finished. And the last book that I finished is Those Left Behind by N.C. Scrimgeour, and I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. This is a sci-fi that I've had on my Kindle for a while, and I wanted a switch up. I had read some fantasy, some historical fiction. It's kind of a first contact with a twist. The planet is dying, people are starving, and so this small contingent of officers and crew shoot through this way station to see what's on the other side in a last-ditch effort to save the planet and the people on it. There are quite a few characters that we follow in this book. I forget how many POV characters are in this, but it's at least 5, if not 6. I did find that the very quick shifts between the POVs was a bit jarring, especially since we weren't following the same events in pretty much any of the POVs. Some of them we were, but they all kind of get split up after there is a moment where things definitely go awry after they arrive on the new civilization's main planet. N.C. Scrimgeour does a great job with her characters. Her characters all felt very fleshed out. There are several POVs from the alien races that were very interesting, and she does a really good job with the consistency of their physicality and culture. Overall, it was just a really enjoyable read, and it was a fun way to end out the month. And I think I'm pretty sure I want to keep going with this trilogy. I want to see what happens next. I'm very curious. My intrigue is piqued. There were 2 books that I did put down this month. Now, before I talk about these, I want to talk very briefly about why I'm including these in my video. So the term DNF has it's become something in the community that is an immediate negative. It's an immediate, oh my gosh, I hated that book and I put it down because I didn't like it and this, that, and the other thing. Which is true sometimes. Sometimes we just really don't jive with books. Sometimes it's, I'm not in a good headspace for this right now. Sometimes it's, you know what, I'm just not really feeling this genre or subgenre right now. Sometimes it's, you know what, this book just isn't really the right fit for me. I usually come at it from the perspective of, you know what, this book isn't a good fit for me as a reader. And that's neither my fault nor the fault of the book. It's something that I want to include in my wrap-ups from now on. First of all, because I don't want any misunderstandings to come out of it. If someone sees that I have started a book and I don't end up finishing it, then they're just guessing. And I don't want that, because I would rather just tell you guys, because that makes it so much easier and less confusing. So, the 2 books that I put down this month, the first one was Prince of the Wasteland by Joseph Sale. And this is one that I had heard recommended very highly by my friend Leslie over at The Nerdy Narrative. She really loves this series, and I think that's awesome. I want to say about 10 or 15% into this book, which is not very long, and it's not a very long book. And I really liked the world and the idea of it, but I decided to put it down because I don't know how to describe it other than I just really wasn't jiving with it. So I did put this one down. I don't know that I'll be returning to it, but I'll never say never. The second book that I put down this month was The Crew by my friend Sadir Samir. This book is usually described as Deadpool meets, I'm trying to remember the second one, but for me at least, it felt very much like that kind of shonen anime, those 90s shonen anime shows, with just the incredibly zany humor, a main character with, you know, a big heart and a tragic past kind of thing. I think for me personally, the humor was just not my brand of humor. I just felt like it wasn't a good fit for me personally, and that's why I ended up putting it down. At first, I didn't put DNFs in my videos just because I was afraid that was going to draw negative attention to the books, which I don't necessarily want. But I also think it's important for me to be transparent, and that way you guys know also the books that maybe aren't a good fit for me, because that's just an honest assessment of my reading tastes. I hope you guys had also a fabulous month of reading. I hope that you are going to have an awesome month of reading in the month of April. I've already started mine and I'm very excited. We've been kicking off the Keymark Readathon over on the Keymark Discord. It's been a blast so far. I'm one of the team captains. So yeah, I'm looking forward to another great month here in April. I'm continuing working on my book. It's been a little slow these last couple of weeks for different reasons, but I'm hoping that in April I can kick back off and get a whole bunch of writing in. I hope you guys are all having a great month. I hope you are reading 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.